You know from my little assistant here that one of my favorite breeds is Golden Retrievers, but you might not know that American Foxhounds are also a favorite breed of mine. I am a scent hound girly through and through, and there are a lot of misconceptions out there about them. Let's talk about it. One of the biggest misconceptions I see out there comes from sort of the old school hunting community. Now, I'm not talking all hunters, but kind of that old school mentality. And that misconception is that hound dogs cannot live inside, they are not pets, and if you do let them live inside, they cannot hunt. This could not be further from the truth. Plenty of hound dogs do just fine living outside in clean conditions and when they're well cared for, but if you let your hound in the house, it's not going to ruin them. It's not going to make them too soft for hunting. Their instincts are still there. That's just not how drive and motivation works in dogs. Working ability is not all or nothing. Plenty of hounds live indoors and are great hunters. If you want to see an example, check out my friend 2 Redbones on Instagram. I'll leave a link in the description. They are a pair of red-bone coonhounds, and they are great hunters who also really enjoy living on the couch. Hunting is the traditional job of most scent hound breeds. Hi. So I support responsible hunting, and I think the dogs get a lot out of it. I also fully support hounds living outside as long as they're well taken care of and the conditions are clean and they're brought inside if it gets too cold or too hot. I'm okay with that. That's a legitimate personal choice. What I don't like is this myth that persists that you will ruin a hound's hunting ability by letting them live inside. It's just not true, and some people use that as an excuse to not care very well for their dogs and keep them living in unacceptable conditions. And that's what I really don't like about this misconception. On the other side, there is a misconception that you have to train a hound to hunt and it's not an instinctual genetic behavior for them. Some people believe that you can completely undo hunting training, and it just ignores the role of genetics in dog breed development. I know this myth comes from a good place. People maybe don't really understand hunting, or they assume that all hunting dogs are kept in subpar conditions and they just want the best for these dogs. I understand they're coming from a good place. So you'll see this misconception floating around the rescue sphere because of that. There's also a tendency for some backyard hunters, not all hunters, not the responsible hunt clubs, but there is this tendency for them to get rid of their dogs in pretty cruel ways if they're not good hunters. And so rescues see a lot of these cases. So it's understandable that this misconception developed, but that doesn't make it accurate. It's just not all in how you raise them. Dogs have been assisting humans in various jobs for literally thousands of years. And over that time, we've selectively bred dogs that exhibit certain traits, and that's how breeds came about. Scent hounds have been selected over time for their noses and their tracking ability and their prey drive. These hunting instincts are literally in their DNA. Now, genetic expression is a spectrum, so some hounds may have a stronger instinct to hunt and some may have much weaker instincts to hunt, and those are the ones that often get sent into rescue, but it is still in their DNA, and you can't just train that out of them. Most scent hounds are going to have an innate need to sniff and track, and actually understanding that this is genetic can really help pet owners provide appropriate enrichment opportunities for their breeds. Another misconception that is everywhere is that scent hounds are dumb or untrainable or stupid. Some of the smartest dogs I know are scent hounds. Yeah, your sister is smarter than you. I love you though. And these smart hound dogs are not anomalies. The thing is, most scent hounds have been bred for generations to hunt by sniffing out and tracking their prey and running away from their handlers. They've also been bred to make independent decisions regardless of what the handler tells them. Basically, it's kind of in their DNA to run away from you and not really listen. These qualities are actually really important for hunting, but it does give them some unique challenges when they are pets. Even if your scent hound isn't a hunting dog, his brain is still wired to think about how to accomplish a task the most efficient way. This means hounds will sometimes just straight up refuse to do what you ask, even if they do understand what you're asking. This leads people to think that hound dogs are dumb, but in reality, they're not listening to you because they're so smart. The key to training a hound is to make it worth it for them. You want to make sure they are incentivized enough to want to do what you're asking. And because they're so food motivated, that usually means a lot of yummy treats. One of my trainer friends, Paige Novak from Turning Point Dog Training in Cleveland, has also explained to me that she works with a lot of hounds that have a very low frustration tolerance. They get bored easily and they don't want to do the work once they're bored. So you have to make things interesting or they're not going to keep working. And that sometimes makes people think that they're untrainable. But actually, they just don't want to repeat the same thing over and over and over and over. You got to make it fun and interesting for them. There's also a misconception that scent hounds cannot be off leash ever. And there is some truth to this. Like we said earlier, hounds are literally bred to run away from their handlers. And because of that, plenty of hounds may never be off-leash reliable, but I'm not a fan of blanket statements, and I know plenty of hounds that have been able to be off-leash reliable, including one of my own. Long lines and retractable leashes are great options for hounds that genuinely cannot be off-leash or haven't been trained yet for off-leash, but it's a stretch to say that no hound can be off-leash or they can never be off-leash. My first American Foxhound hiked off-leash for most of his life. Full disclosure, it did take a lot of training and some waiting for him to mature before he could, but he absolutely could. If you want to train your scent hound to have a reliable recall so they can be off-leash with you, you're going to want to start with a strong recall foundation using positive reinforcement training. And you'll want to proof this cue by using it in a variety of locations and with a variety of distractions. I also recommend seeking out a positive reinforcement trainer and look into training facilities near you. There are a lot of training facilities that actually offer entire classes just on recall. Now, just a couple more notes on reliable recall. You might have seen the words balanced training and electronic collars in context of reliable recall. Part of proper balanced training is a positive foundation for the behavior before layering over that aversive tool to proof the cue. So I do not recommend the use of an e-collar until your dog has a solid understanding of the recall. If you do choose to use an e-collar in addition to the positive foundation for that recall, you're just going to want to make sure that you work with a trainer and do a lot of research because there is a high potential fallout from e-collar use. I'm not saying it's always bad, but I'm saying the consequences of doing it wrong can be pretty bad. Versus positive reinforcement, even if you do it wrong, it's not going to do any damage to your dog, right? So you just want to do a lot of research and be really careful and preferably work with a trainer. And you want to make sure this trainer is actually balanced and uses positive reinforcement in addition to the aversives, because you don't want to work with a compulsion trainer. Compulsion training it's just abuse. And if you do use an e-collar, I recommend Dogtra or e-collar Technologies mini educators. These are highly customizable and have a lot of different levels. I think the mini educator has 100 different levels. So you can really customize it to your dog's needs so that you're at a minimal level of aversion. Another fun misconception that I don't like is that scent hounds can't live in cities or apartments. I live in a house now, but I lived in city apartments with my foxhounds for 10 years. They did just fine. Some individual hounds really do need land to run on, and they're not going to do well in cities, but especially rescue hounds, I find do very well in cities. There's a lot of scents, so every walk is an adventure, and I don't love when they eat street snacks, but my dogs certainly love finding the street snacks. Hounds love to explore their worlds through scent, and cities just have a lot of that. I think that cities are actually a great place for hounds to live because it allows them to really fulfill that natural tendency for sniffing. It can take a little more effort to provide a scent hound with enough exercise in a city, but There are lots of options, and a scent hound can live a very fulfilled, happy life in a city, particularly if they're a less drivey one. On this same note, there's a myth that scent hounds are way too loud for apartments. Now, for some hounds, that is probably true, and for some apartment communities, that's probably true. It's not an issue I've had, though. Like I said, I lived in apartments with my foxhounds for 10 years. Now, foxhounds are the quiet hounds. They're still hounds. They still make a lot of noise, but they are the quieter ones. In the time I lived in apartments with my dogs, I had one complaint and I had one or two neighbors make a comment to me, but that's it. Out of a decade, that's really not that bad. Most dogs, scent hound or not, are going to vocalize more when they are not feeling very fulfilled. And so if you're doing everything you can to provide your hound with a fulfilling and enriching life and giving them enough exercise, they're not going to feel that need to vocalize as much. A scent hound whose mental, physical, and emotional needs are being properly fulfilled is still going to be talkative. They're still going to make noise, but they're not going to make so much noise that it's unreasonable. It's really important to combat these misconceptions and help educate people about scent hounds. You know, a lot of rescues find themselves overwhelmed with scent hounds because they're less adoptable, in large part because of these misconceptions. I think that's so unfair to the dogs, and it's unfair to the rescues and shelters themselves because these dogs are adoptable and they can be great pets. People just have a lot of misconceptions about them. I also think combating these misconceptions is important because sometimes they give people the justification to abuse their dogs and neglect their dogs in the name of not ruining them for hunting. And that's also just not okay. The only way to combat misconceptions is to educate. So here I am. Like most misconceptions, there is a kernel of truth to all of these myths, but educating and embracing nuance about them helps us help hounds. Vilifying all hunters fundamentally ignores some of the genetic predispositions of this breed and their desire for a job. It also builds resentment between the rescue and hunting communities. And none of that is good for hounds as a whole. When rescue and hunting communities work together, we can help more hounds find good homes. And isn't that what we really care about?